They say loyalty is rewarded, but as Sadiq's gleaming Mercedes pulled into the village square, I realized that sometimes, your faithfulness is exactly what makes you disposable. We meet Halima, who is still waiting at her orange store despite the stranger's promise from part 1. She is motivated by the dream of finally starting her life with Sadiq after 5 years of patient devotion, but her flaw is her willful blindness. She clings to promises even when the evidence of betrayal is already pulling up in a luxury car. The car door opened, and she stepped out fast, a woman wrapped in silk and gold, her heels clicking against the dusty ground like a countdown. Halima's hands tightened around the orange she'd been polishing. Sadiq emerged next, his suit sharp enough to cut, his smile wide enough to wound. He didn't look at her. Not once. The crowd gathered quickly. 5 years was a long time, and everyone remembered the boy who'd left promising to return for the girl who sold oranges. Halima stepped forward, her heart a drumbeat in her throat. Sadiq, she called, her voice barely above a whisper. He turned, and for a moment, just a breath, she saw something flicker in his eyes. Recognition. Maybe regret. Then it was gone. Halima, he said, the name sounding foreign in his mouth. Good to see you. He placed his hand on the woman's waist. This is Aisha. My fiancée. The word landed like a stone in still water. Fiancé. Halima felt the ground tilt beneath her feet. Someone in the crowd gasped. Mama Binta's face hardened from across the square. We had plans, Halima managed, her voice cracking. Sadiq's laugh was light, dismissive. Plans. Halima, we were kids. I was grateful for your friendship back then, truly. But I've moved on. We both should. He glanced at her store, at the pyramid of oranges she'd arranged that morning with such hope. You've done well for yourself here. That's good. Aisha smiled, a practiced curve of lips that didn't reach her eyes. It's sweet, really. Village friendships are so pure. Halima stood frozen as they walked away, Sadiq's arm around his fiancée, his laughter floating back like smoke. Her oranges sat untouched. No one approached her store. They only stared, their pity worse than their silence. The next morning, Aisha came alone. She wore sunglasses that cost more than Halima's entire inventory and carried herself like someone used to being watched. The market grew quiet as she approached the orange store. Halima, right? Aisha removed her sunglasses, examining an orange as if it were a curiosity from another world. Sadiq told me about you. About everything. Halima straightened her spine. Then you know he made promises. Promises. Aisha's laugh was soft, almost kind, which made it crueler. Darling, men make promises to village girls all the time. It's what they do before they know better. She set the orange down, her manicured nails gleaming. But I didn't come to hurt you. I came to help. I don't need your help. Don't you? Aisha gestured at the store, at Halima's worn wrapper and calloused hands. How much do you make here? In a month. I spend that on shoes. She leaned closer, her perfume overwhelming. I'm offering you a way out. Come to Lagos. Work in our household. You'll have a room, meals, a salary. It's better than this. The word this hung between them like an insult. Halima's entire life, reduced to a dismissive gesture. You want me to be your maid, Halima said flatly. I want to help an old friend of my fiancé's. Aisha's smile sharpened. Unless you'd rather stay here, selling oranges and pretending you weren't left behind. Halima's hands trembled. She wanted to scream, to throw every orange at this woman's perfect face. Instead, she spoke quietly, I'd rather sell oranges with dignity than serve in a house built on lies. Aisha's eyes flashed. Suit yourself. She turned to leave, then paused. Sadiq was right about you. Too proud for your own good. They found her that evening behind the store, staring at nothing. Zainab came first, her baby strapped to her back, followed by Fatima and Amina. They didn't ask questions. They simply sat. I loved him, Halima finally whispered. For 5 years, I loved him. We know, Zainab said gently. I waited. I built this stall thinking we'd build a life together. I turned down Yusuf, turned down Ibrahim, turned down every man who came because I'd already chosen. Her voice cracked. And he doesn't even remember. Fatima gripped her hand. He remembers. Men like that always remember. They just pretend they don't because it's easier. Everyone's talking, Halima continued. At the well, in the mosque, at the market. Poor Halima, they say. Poor foolish Halima who waited for nothing. Then leave, Amina said abruptly. The others stared at her. I mean it. If staying here means drowning in their pity, leave. Start somewhere new. Run away. Halima's laugh was bitter. Let him win. It's not about winning, Zainab said. It's about surviving. Halima looked at each of them, these women who'd stood by her through everything. Then she thought of the stranger from weeks ago, the man who'd bought her last oranges when no one else would. He'd given her his card. Mr. David Okonkwo, it read. Opportunities come to those who serve others, he'd said. She'd kept the card, tucked in her wrapper like a secret. Perhaps there were different ways to survive. Perhaps staying meant something more than just enduring. But that night, as her friends held her, Halima felt something shift inside her chest, not hope exactly, but something harder. Something that might keep her standing. The market day started like any other. Halima arranged her oranges in careful pyramids, each one polished until it gleamed. Customers came and went, their transactions brief, their eyes avoidant. She'd become the village's cautionary tale. It was midday when Aisha returned, this time with an entourage. 3 women from Lagos, all jewelry and judgment, peeking through the market stalls like tourists at a zoo. They stopped at Halima's stand. These oranges, one of them said loudly, are they even clean? Halima beat back her response. Aisha watched, amused, as her friends made a show of examining the fruit. They bought nothing. They simply disrupted, laughed, moved on. An hour later, the screaming started. My necklace. Aisha's voice cut through the market noise. My grandmother's necklace. It's gone. The crowd converged. Sadiq appeared from nowhere, his face etched with concern that seemed almost rehearsed. Are you certain? I had it at lunch. I had it when we came to the market. Aisha's eyes were wet, her hand at her throat. Someone stole it. Mama Binta pushed through the crowd, her voice sharp. Accusing someone is serious business, girl. Are you sure you didn't simply misplace it? I don't misplace 50,000 naira necklaces, Aisha snapped. Sadiq held up his hands, the picture of reason. Perhaps if we simply looked around. Maybe it fell. Check the stalls, someone suggested. Start with the orange sellers, another voice called. Halima's blood went cold. She knew that voice. It belonged to Sadiq's cousin. Before she could protest, hands were rifling through her crates. Oranges tumbled to the ground. Her carefully built pyramids collapsed. And then. Here. Sadiq's cousin held up a glittering gold chain, its pendant catching the sunlight. It was buried under the oranges. The market went silent. Every eye turned to Halima. That's not, I didn't, the words tangled in her throat. Aisha's gasp was theatrical, perfect. How could you? I didn't touch your necklace. Halima's voice rose, desperate. Someone planted it there. But the evidence gleamed in the afternoon sun, and the crowd's verdict was already written on their faces. In the distance, Sadiq stood very still, his expression carefully neutral. Only his eyes betrayed him, cold, calculating, satisfied. They gathered in Mama Binta's compound that evening, the elders and the accusers, the witnesses and the accused. Halima sat on a wooden stool, her hands folded in her lap, her back straight despite the weight crushing her chest. Across from her, Aisha dabbed at her eyes while Sadiq stood behind her like a shield. Mama Binta, the oldest woman in the village and keeper of its memory, sat elevated on her platform. Her walking stick rested against her chair, her eyes sharp as blades. "Speak," she said to Aisha. The story came out polished, rehearsed. The missing necklace. The search. The discovery in Halima's orange crates. "I don't want to believe it," Aisha concluded, her voice trembling. "But the evidence." "Evidence," Mama Binta repeated. She turned to Halima. "And you?" "I didn't steal anything." Halima's voice was steady, though her hands shook. "I've never stolen in my life." "That necklace was planted." "By whom?" The question hung like a noose. Halima's eyes found Sadiq's. He stared back, daring her to speak his name. But what proof did she have? What defense except the truth of her character? "I don't know," she admitted. "But I know my own hands. They've never taken what wasn't mine." Mama Binta nodded slowly. "I've known this girl since she was born. I knew her mother, her grandmother. 3 generations of honest women." She fixed Aisha with a look that could cut stone. "And you, city girl, I've known for 3 days." Hope flickered in Halima's chest. "But," Mama Binta continued, her voice heavy, "character is not evidence. The necklace was found in her store. Witnesses confirm it." She closed her eyes, and when she opened them, they were filled with something that looked like grief. "Without proof of another hand in this, I cannot ignore what was discovered." "Then you condemn me?" Halima whispered. "I cannot save you from evidence, child. Even if my heart knows better." Mama Binta's fingers tightened around her walking stick. "The Council of Elders will decide your fate tomorrow. Until then, you will remain here, under watch." As they led her to the back room, Halima caught Sadiq's expression. He'd won, and they both knew it. But there was something else in his eyes, something that looked almost like fear, quickly buried beneath triumph. The council convened at dawn. 7 elders sat in a semicircle, their faces carved from decades of judgment. At their center sat Al-Haji Musa, Sadiq's father, a man trapped between blood and duty, his eyes carefully avoiding his son's face. The compound filled with villagers. Everyone came to see Halima's fall. Some looked sorrowful, others curious, a few openly satisfied. Justice, they called it. Halima called it execution. Sadiq presented the evidence himself. The necklace, now in a clear bag. The witnesses who'd seen it discovered. Aisha's tearful testimony. He played the role of reluctant accuser perfectly, pained but principled, a man who believed in justice even when it hurt. "I take no pleasure in this," he said, his voice carrying across the silent crowd. "Halima and I, we have history. But theft is theft. The law must be upheld." Al-Haji Musa's jaw tightened. "And you swear this testimony is complete and truthful?" "On my honor," Sadiq replied. The words felt obscene in his mouth. Halima wanted to laugh, to scream. Instead, she stood when called, her voice clear despite the terror singing in her veins. "I did not steal that necklace. I have never stolen anything. I don't know how it came to be in my store, but I know this: I am being erased. Someone wants me gone, and they've found the perfect way to do it." "Accusations require proof," one elder said. "Then where is the proof of my guilt?" Halima shot back. "Finding something in my store doesn't prove I put it there. The market was crowded. Anyone could have." The sound of engines cut through her words. Loud, expensive, impossible to ignore. The crowd turned as one, murmurs rising like a wave. Through the compound gates came a convoy of black cars, their chrome gleaming, their presence transforming the dusty village square into something else entirely. The vehicles stopped. Doors opened. And David Okonkwo stepped out, dressed in a suit that cost more than most villagers earn in a year, his presence commanding immediate silence. Behind him came men in professional attire, carrying briefcases and tablets. He walked straight to the council, his eyes finding Halima's for just a moment. In them, she saw recognition. Promise. Vindication. "Forgive the interruption," David said, his voice smooth and absolute. But I believe this council is about to make a terrible mistake. Alhaji Musa rose slowly, his authority challenged by this stranger's confidence. And who are you to interrupt these proceedings? David Okonkwo. He didn't offer his hand, didn't bow. CEO of Okonkwo Distribution Network. Perhaps you've heard of us, we handle 60% of the agricultural exports in the southern region. The elders exchanged glances. Even here, in this small village, that name carried weight. We are handling a village matter, Alhaji Musa said carefully. I'm sure a man of your standing has more important. This woman, David gestured to Halima without looking away from the council, saved my business 3 weeks ago. I was stranded between meetings, my driver delayed, my blood sugar crashing. She gave me her last oranges and refused payment. When I insisted, she said, kindness isn't a transaction. He smiled, cold and sharp. That philosophy is about to become very expensive for some people in this village. Sadiq's face had gone pale. Aisha gripped his arm. I came to formalize a business partnership with Miss Halima, David continued. Imagine my surprise when my team's background check revealed she was about to be banished for theft. He snapped his fingers. One of his associates stepped forward with a tablet. Shall we discuss what else my background check revealed? This is irregular, one elder protested. So is framing an innocent woman. David's voice could have cut glass. But please, continue your proceedings. I'm happy to wait until after you've made your ruling. Then I make mine. His eyes found Sadiq. About the 300,000 naira loan you took from my firm last month, Mr. Sadiq. The one you claimed was for inventory. The one you haven't started repaying. The crowd erupted. Sadiq's mouth opened, closed. Aisha took a step back, her eyes widening. You're lying, Sadiq managed. Am I? David's associate tapped the tablet screen. Loan agreement, signed by you. Bank transfers to your account. Purchase orders that were never fulfilled. He looked at the elders. This man borrowed money claiming he was investing in agricultural distribution. Instead, he's been funding a lifestyle he can't afford, and when his creditors started asking questions, he needed a distraction. David turned fully to Halima now, his expression softening just slightly. That necklace. I had it traced. It was purchased in Lagos 3 days ago with money from that loan. Not a family heirloom. Just another lie. The silence that followed was absolute. In it, Halima felt something break inside her chest, not her heart this time, but the chains that had been holding her down. These are fabrications. Sadiq's voice cracked across the compound, desperate now. He's trying to discredit me because why? David asked madly. Because you're so important. Mr. Sadiq, before today, I didn't know you existed. My only interest in this village was a woman who showed me kindness when she had nothing to gain from it. He addressed the council directly. I came to offer Miss Halima a partnership. A distribution network for her oranges and other local produce. A chance to turn her small stall into something significant. He pulled out a folder, handed it to Alhaji Musa. That's the contract. 20% ownership in a new subsidiary, guaranteed income, training, resources. I don't make offers like this often. I make them when I find people whose integrity matches their work ethic. Alhaji Musa opened the folder, his hands trembling slightly. The numbers on the page made his eyes widen. But then I discovered she was being accused of theft, David continued. So I did what any good businessman does, I investigated. And I found a pattern. He nodded to his associate, who pulled up bank statements on the tablet. Sadiq Musa took a loan from my firm 6 weeks ago. 300,000 naira. The loan officer noted he was persuasive. Talked about family connections, village trust, big plans. He showed us documents, the associate added. Purchase orders from suppliers. Contracts with buyers. All of it fake. We verified that yesterday. Sadiq's father stood frozen, his face ashen. Around the compound, villagers pressed closer, hungry for every word. The necklace was purchased 4 days ago from a jeweler in Surale, David said. My team has the receipt. The jeweler identified Mr. Sadiq from a photograph. He paid cash from my loan. David's smile was thin, merciless. You weren't just framing Halima. You were creating a diversion, hoping that if the village was focused on our crime, no one would notice yours. This is. Sadiq looked around wildly, finding no allies. Even Aisha had stepped away from him, her face calculating, distant. Father, you can't believe. Enough. Alhaji Musa's voice was barely a whisper, but it silenced everyone. He looked at his son with something beyond disappointment, a kind of recognition that this moment had always been coming. Then he turned to Halima. Miss Halima. On behalf of this council, I offer our deepest apologies. Halima couldn't speak. Couldn't move. 5 years of waiting, days of humiliation, hours of terror, all of it crashing against this single moment of vindication. David stepped beside her. The partnership offer stands. In fact, I'm expanding it. Miss Halima will oversee all village procurement for my network. That includes, he glanced at Sadiq, determining which suppliers and distributors we work with in this region. The implication settled like dust. Sadiq had tried to erase Halima from his life. Now she would decide whether he existed in hers. The council's judgment came swiftly. Sadiq was ordered to repay David's farm in full, an impossible sum for a man whose wealth had been built on borrowed money and inflated lies. His Lagos apartment, it turned out, was rented. His car, leased. Even the suit he wore had been purchased on credit he couldn't cover. Aisha left before the sun set. Halima watched from Mama Binta's compound as the woman who'd offered her a maid's position climbed into a taxi, her designer luggage barely fitting in the trunk. She didn't say goodbye to Sadiq. Didn't even look back. She was never real, Halima murmured. David, standing nearby, nodded. Aisha Oladio. One of my firm's compliance consultants. I sent her to evaluate Sadiq's character after his loan application raised flags. He glanced at Halima. She was supposed to see if he was trustworthy. Instead, she watched him betray someone who'd waited 5 years for him. That told us everything. So none of it was real. The engagement. She wore a ring. Played a part. But love. David shook his head. In my experience, people who truly love you don't ask you to become smaller so they can appear larger. Halima thought of Sadiq's words in the square, his dismissal of their history, his reduction of her life to doing well for yourself here. She thought of how easily he'd framed her, how little hesitation he'd shown. What happens to him now? He'll walk, David said simply. I don't believe in destroying people, just in making sure they understand consequences. He'll repay the debt through labor. Warehouse work, loading trucks, inventory management. Honest work. He paused. The kind of work he thought he was too good for. In the compound's courtyard, Sadiq sat alone on the same stool where Halima had faced the council. His father had gone inside, unable to look at him. The villagers had dispersed, their gossip already spreading like wildfire. Poor Sadiq, they'd say now. Poor foolish Sadiq who thought he could outrun his own character. Halima walked toward him. He looked up, his eyes red, his pride shattered across the dusty ground. I'm sorry, he whispered. Are you? She didn't sit, didn't crouch to his level. Are you sorry you hurt me, or sorry you were caught? He had no answer. Perhaps there wasn't one that mattered anymore. I waited for you, Halima said quietly. I built a life around the promise of you. And you came back to erase me. She took a breath. But here's what you never understood, I was never disposable. I was never small. You just needed me to be, so you could feel big. She turned to leave, then paused. I forgive you, Sadiq. Not because you deserve it, but because carrying hate for you would mean you still had space in my life. And that space is now occupied by something better. Behind her, she heard him break. But she didn't turn back. Some sounds, she'd learned, weren't meant to be witnessed. 6 months later, Halima stood in an office 20 floors above Lagos, watching the city sprawl beneath her like a promise kept. The glass walls reflected her image, a woman in a tailored suit, her natural hair styled in elegant twists, her presence commanding the space she occupied. On her desk sat a single orange, polished until it gleamed. A reminder. The quarterly reports look exceptional, David said, entering without knocking. Their partnership had evolved into friendship, built on mutual respect and shared vision. Your village procurement program has increased supplier income by 40%. Other regions are asking to replicate the model. It works because it's honest, Halima replied. Fair prices, transparent dealings, respect for the people doing the work. She picked up the orange, felt its weight in her palm. Everything I learned from a wooden store. Speaking of which, David set down a folder. We received an application from someone requesting to be added to our supplier network. Halima opened it. Sadiq's name stared back at her, his photograph older somehow, humbler. The application was neat, thorough, honest. He'd listed his current work, warehouse loading for David's farm, and his request to eventually supply oranges from his father's land. What do you think? David asked. Halima studied the application for a long moment. She thought of the girl she'd been, waiting by an orange store for a love that was never real. She thought of the woman she'd become, built not from someone else's validation but from her own resilience. Approve it, she said finally. Under standard terms. No favoritism, no penalties. Just business. David nodded, unsurprised. You could have made him wait. Made him suffer. I could have, Halima agreed. But revenge is just another way of letting someone live in your head rent-free. She set the orange back on her desk. I'm not interested in revenge. I'm interested in building something that outlasts all of this, a network where people are valued for what they contribute, not who they know. Where kindness isn't weakness and integrity isn't disposable. She turned back to the window, to the city below where somewhere, in a small village, her friends still sold their goods at market stalls. But now they had fair prices, reliable buyers, and a pathway forward. Because Halima hadn't forgotten where she came from. She'd just refused to let it be the ceiling of where she could go. The orange sat on her desk like a crown. Small, simple, sufficient. Outside, the city moved on, indifferent to individual stories of betrayal and redemption. But inside that office, Halima smiled. Not because she'd won or because Sadiq had lost, but because she'd discovered something more valuable than either victory or vengeance. She'd discovered herself. And that, she'd learned, was the only validation that ever truly mattered. If this story touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Like this video, share it with someone who needs this lesson, and subscribe. Would you have waited 5 years like Halima, or walked away sooner? Tell us in the comments. Your voice matters.